Welcome back. This is the Press Club. Before the break, we were talking about all the days and observances we had this week, including International Men's Day, World Day Against the Abuse of Children, Children's Day, what else did I miss? Students' Day. You asked a very important question before the break, the value or the point of International Men's Day. Is that tit-for-tat situation that women have a day so that men should have one too? What's the point of having International Men's Day? What are we focusing on? What are men supposed to get out of it? Well, I understand that International Men's Day is a Trinidad-born idea that has been embraced by, I think, 65 other countries.
Like the International Criminal Court. And
it's supposed to be a day for men and boys to focus on issues affecting men, men's health, gender equality. We had an interesting story by a young man last night, a clip from a young man attending, I suspect, one of those symposiums for young people this week. And he asked an important question, which you're asking now. You know, what is the point? You know, do young men and young boys even observe the day? Do they understand what it's for? And as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering if by having all of those observances, like International Women's Day, are we in effect creating awareness about issues affecting women, or are we doing more harm than good? I think causing more division or
I think we're doing both, or we have the ability to end up doing both, because the situations facing women differ from country to country. Right. But in each country, the situation that faces women in that country affects all women in that particular country. So in as much as all of these rights, men's rights, women's rights, children's rights, gay rights, lesbian rights, all of the whole gamut of rights, they can confuse, because the United Nations has a calendar. There's a day for everything. Yeah. And you can never follow them all up. And the idea is not only to try to know everything on that day. The idea is to use that day to know as much as you can so that you could remember forever and for it to guide your actions. But we seem to be only celebrating and observing the day. And looking on to the next day. It's like buying newspapers. You know, look at the headline this weekend and wait until the next weekend for the next week. So it all depends on how we do it. I think the way I look at it is that in as much as the rain doesn't fall on one man's house, we are a society, and the problems that affect women also affect men. And if we're not careful, we could breed a society where we breed women into believing that their problems are men. You know, men are the problem.
And I think that's the point that the young man was trying to make. You know, that in pushing for days like International Women's Day and building up women, that we are now marginalizing men and leading women to believe that men aren't important anymore. We don't need a man. We don't need, you know. And
so men will now sit on a Trinidad and will now say, listen, we need to get back our equality because the women are more equal than us now. I think that it can be discussed. I think International Men's Day, it allows men to look at the issues facing, but we tend to take the victim approach. You know, International Men's Day, let's see what we can look for. Let's see what problems we could identify, rather than let's look and see what strengths we have, what areas we have in common. And I would like on International Men's Day to hear women give a view on how they feel about men. Rather than inviting men to only, you know, to have a mutual admiration club where we sit down and asking each other what we think about what we should be doing. I think, you know, the problems that affect men affect women. There are problems that are across the genders, across the sexes. And take, for example, children's rights. There's this ad, the most popular of them all, which says a child has a right to have a diary that the parent does not have any permission to have access to. And the average St. Lucian woman will tell you, not at my home. You are bringing nothing to the table, you know. Children cannot have equal rights with parents. Now, that is how we were brought up. But there's a Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is for everybody, and there's an International Convention on the Rights of the Child, which requires, legally, universally, that we treat children a certain way. Now, the likes of RISE and other organizations are saying to us as parents to take on that responsibility and use Child Rights Day to learn more about our responsibilities to our children, to know the rights, to defend them, to protect them, and also to respect them. But I have never heard, like I said, a session that takes the children and provides them with a copy of the International Convention on Rights of the Child, and like in class in a school, morning and afternoon, going through that entire thing to let them know why it was put together and what those rights are, and also that with every right comes responsibilities. And as I suggested earlier this week, what I would like to see insofar as children's rights, education and edification is concerned, is we have to get to that time when parents will sit with children in a household and discuss those rights. You know, and say, listen, I'm your mother, or I'm your father, or we are your parents, and we have rights over all of that, because the fundamental right we have is we make you. But even we did not know all of those things. So how are we going to do these things? Do you think we can implement all of them? You know, the average parent say, yes, the paper says you have a right to have a diary that I'm not supposed to see. But I'm your mother. You can't have a diary at my house. I need to see what you have. What's wrong? Are you being encouraged to hide things away from me? And if the child, as many do, is going to say, hello, that's my right, and the child is going to be defending the right, then you know the parent-child clash comes there, where the mother or the father will just take the damn diary and open it and go through it. Now, there are some children, one of whom I know, who will be honest enough to tell you, I don't want you to open my diary because I don't have nothing to hide. And you will go and open it because you don't believe her. And then you open it and she was right, there was nothing to hide. That child is not going to forget that, and is going to keep reminding you that you did not trust me. You know, and if that child goes with that thing that you have an inbuilt mistrust because you're the parent and he or she is the child, then how are you going to overcome that barrier where the child is growing up with a thing, my father doesn't trust me, or my mother doesn't trust me? So I think before we talk about child rights, we have to bridge that gap, that parent-child gap, that gap that says that because I'm your mother, because in our society we're told fathers can't make children, it's mothers who make children. So the mother would say, listen, I made you. You are the fruit of my womb, and you can't have equal rights with me. You know, so there's a job now to convince that mother that that is not the framework that you're supposed to be thinking, because that child is going to grow up into being an adult like yourself. So we need to manage that process of growing up so that you can share with your son or daughter or children some experiences in life that you had that you want to avoid them to have, or that you want them to have. You know, so I think we need to encourage parent-children dialogue first, before introduction of the rights thing that says, listen, I have a right. You know, the dial 911 thing in the United States is an example where single parent fathers end up with children in situations where they never expected, having to feed them 3 times a day, drop them at school, do the various things that the mother stays home and do. And at some point, you know, they lose patience, particularly West Indian, Caribbean men, and you know they give the child a lash, and the child dials 911, and they get picked up, and you know they get a community service sentence, and like a Guyanese friend of mine, they took the kids, took a flight back home, and in those days it was GAC, Guyana Airways Corporation, and they would announce, ladies and gentlemen, we are now in Guyana airspace. When that announcement came, he took out his belt and started beating the children on the plane and asked them, dial 911.
Yeah. Was a little friend of mine, what's his name, Russell Peter. He's a Indian Canadian comedian, and he tried that on his father one time. His father said, well, go ahead, here's the phone. But I know it'll take the police at least 15 minutes to get here. Between that time, somebody going to get a hurting. We're due for a break. Let's take the break, and then when we come back, we can shift focus. It's a very interesting article, I think, as far as media issues is concerned, in the Star newspaper, looking at the attacks in France and the media coverage of it, suggestion that the media is perhaps biased in the way that it has covered the France attacks. So when we come back, I want us to touch on that a little bit. This is the Press Club. We'll be right back.